Welcome back to the third and final part of the Run 8 Hesperia Local Series. This time we're going to make the trip back to Victorville and return our setouts for the next train to pick up. Quite a lot of traffic on the line, and we're going to need to sit and wait as it passes us. One of the trains, the UP 7836, is coming in the opposite direction we are, so we definitely need to wait for him. Here comes the eastbound train. This one isn't going to be a problem for me because he's running on the other main track, main 1. The UP train is coming our way on main 2. You can see he's turned off his bright headlights and his ditch lights to avoid blinding the oncoming train, and also for me. Frank sounds his horn and rings the bell because we've got a crewman on the ground observing his train running by. Still has his lights on dim. I'm asking Frank what his horsepower per ton ratio is, since he looks like he's got a pretty long, heavy train. He tells me 2.3, which is about enough to get him over the grade, so he should be fine. He will be struggling a little bit. Frank has pusher units on the back, also known as DPUs, or distributed power units. We once called them helpers, but that generally connotes a manned helper, and today on the Cajon Pass, nearly all the helper locomotives are unmanned, radio controlled from the front locomotive. He's going to need all that power to get over the pass. There's no question about that, and those DPUs are already working, as you could hear when they're running by our position.
Cal 101, Hesperia local, new leader, the BNSF 7227, now opening up a switch between CP Lugo and CP Frost on Main MAIN 2 for an eastbound move. We'll cross over at Frost. Thank you. BNSF out.
Like before, we don't have a dispatcher on duty today, but we still need to alert the other trains as to what we're doing. So we announce our movements, and that way everybody knows what's going on. The EOT move light comes on and you hear the beep. That signifies that our last car is moving and we can begin to notch out the throttle. You don't want to start notching out the throttle until the last car is moving, or you can actually break apart your train. With a short train like this, that's quite unlikely, but nevertheless it's best to be safe. As we begin to pass this switch, when our locomotive passes it, I'll hit the button on the rail driver to begin the countdown. We're 670 some odd feet, and as you can see, it's counting down now. When it counts down to 0, we will have completely cleared that switch. Cleared the switch, stopping our train, and we're going to go ahead and line it for normal mainline movement.
BNSF 7227 reports all switches hand operated between CP Lugo and CP Frost. Line and lock for normal mainline movement running under dispatcher authority. CTC control. BNSF 7227 out.
Since there's no dispatcher on duty, we can line our own switches and clear our own signals as long as we look at the dispatch panel and make sure we're not interfering with anybody else's movements. We're headed downhill, so it's pretty easy to get up to speed, and we've got a 45-mile-an-hour speed limit coming up. Already we're doing 48, so we turn the throttle back to idle and we begin to apply our dynamic brakes. The dynamic brakes aren't enough. We're adding some air brake now too to control the train speed. Just holding it to 50 miles an hour right now with the dynamic brakes at about notch 21. It goes from 0 to 100. We're pulling about 164 amps back into our resistor bank. which is like a load bank that uses the traction motors as generators and thus slows the movement of the locomotive. Increasing the dynamic brake so that we can get down a little better, close to 45 miles an hour. We've got this curve coming up. Want to be safe. I decided to change the color of the text that comes up on the screen so that it's not quite as distracting while running the train. You'll see on the left are the industries at Thorn. We passed them when we were heading westbound in part 1. BNSF 7227, approach medium, advance of frost crossover. Well, that wasn't right. That's an advance approach signal, not an approach medium, yellow over green. Not a big deal on the simulator, and luckily we have this HUD that tells us what the real aspect is. So if you're not a signal expert, fear not. You'll be able to read and know what the aspect is. I jumped the gun a little bit. The advance approach aspect tells us the next signal will be an approach signal.
Hey, what's up, Chris?
Hey, Matt, just proceed in and hold short on your tail end I'll just take your DPUs off of you.
Alright, where do you want me to stop short for the DPUs?
You're at your tail end before you're in track 105 there, I guess.
Okay.
Well, we noticed that there was a stack train waiting as we began to climb the flyover, and we're going to clear the signal for him. He's a higher priority train than us, so we want to let him go. We're going to wait on him. So we gave ourselves a stop signal and cleared the signal for the stack train.
Come in sometimes. Were you going to take your power to the house, or are you going to leave it on?
Yeah, I was going to bring it in.
Okay. Well, I was going to start humping, and I didn't want to start humping, you know, and then block those engines in on you. That's the only reason I'm doing it this way.
Alright.
The stack train begins to move, and we begin to slow, Climbing this little grade, it's easy to keep the speed under control, but once we crest the grade, we're going to start going into dynamic brake to keep the speed under control. Notice that when we first go into dynamic brake, it says set in yellow. That means that the brakes are being set up. You can't begin to apply the dynamic brake immediately. You have to wait for a setup period before you begin to increase the load on the dynamic brake. Now we're pulling about 179 amps as we begin to slow the train, and we're going to make sure that we can cross over as soon as that eastbound train clears. We've clicked the crossover switch, which means it's stacked. It will throw as soon as the stacked train clears the route. We're looking ahead to confirm our signal aspect, and it is a red stop signal, so here go the air brakes. Make sure we can come to a good stop. We took what's called an 11-pound reduction. We had 86 pounds in the brakes. We lowered it to 75. That was an 11-pound reduction, which is enough to bring the train to a complete stop.
Hey, Matt, did you forget, you got the MRV at West Colton 05, right?
Yes, sir.
Forget to crew it?
No, I think I should have crewed it.
Hang on, let me do a refresh. Yep, sorry, my bad. I was looking at the customer orders you had. Thanks.
Yep, no problem.
We'll begin to inch up closer to the signal, releasing our air and beginning to apply a little bit of throttle, because we know that pretty soon that train will be clear and we can begin our eastbound move.
Looks like about 27 customer orders. Cool. I see you got your lawn chair and you're sitting down there.
Notice that we see the previous signal aspect on the HUD above, not the next signal aspect. If we saw the next aspect, that would be a cheat, because the engineer doesn't know what the next aspect is. He has to actually look and see. We're going to follow directly behind that eastbound train. It's safe because he's going in the same direction we are, so we have a restricting signal to cross over onto main 2.
BNSF 7227 crossing over from main 1 to main 2 on a restricting signal at CP Frost, eastbound 7227 out.
That light blue or faint white is what's known as a lunar signal, and today it's often used to indicate a restricting signal. In the earlier days, it was more usual to see a flashing red instead.
Are you gonna pull that mid DP off, Chris?
Yeah, or you can, it doesn't matter.
Alright, I'm gonna pull up a little bit more here and then I'll grab it.
We quickly drop the signal, that is, turn it to red, so that we can then clear the opposing signal for the westbound train, who's already reduced to 11 miles an hour because he saw a red signal. Thankfully he didn't stop, so we're going to have a rolling meet. It's best that we don't hold up mainline trains when we're doing local work like this.
I think you have a crew interaction to see.
I line that switch for a little bit. Oh, did I? Yeah. There you go. I relinquished it.
Thank you.
We're still running down grade, so we apply some dynamic brake to manage our speed. We've got our speed under control and we've come out of dynamic brakes. Throttle's back in idle. Looking back, I actually did this the hard way. I should have stopped here at this switch and headed into the sidings and yard here at Victorville. I wasn't sure if there were cars ahead of me and I needed to back into a specific track, so I decided to go on back past this turnout. Again, in hindsight, I should have just stopped and pulled on into the clear right here.
About 10 cars.
10 to go.
Nine cars.
9.
The W sign is a whistle post telling us that there is a crossing up ahead. We don't start blowing right away for it because we're running at a slower speed than you would normally run. You can see the cars crossing the crossing. Now we turn on our bell and we're going to sound the horn.
Cars. Half a car. Pitch.
We get to pull forward.
Yeah, your air's on. Good to go.
Up ahead you can see the Cemex plant in Victorville, definitely the biggest industry there. It gets a lot of traffic every day. We're not going to service that plant today. We will do a crossover move near the plant. The error message about excessive coupler angle lists a car, it's the UTLX 436457, that has either fouled a switch or run a switch. This isn't our train causing the error, it's somebody near West Colton.
I don't see where it was at.
That was the track that we switched the DPU onto.
Oh, yeah.
I start the counter, so I'll know when my entire train has passed this switch and I can begin my reverse move in the clear into the yard at Victorville. We were a little late to apply that brake, but here we are at a stop. It would be fair to say my train handling hasn't been very good today, and my real-life conductor, if he had to do all this walking because I was overshooting these switches, would probably have a beef with me at the end of the job. You can see from these arrows where we're trying to put our cars. There's 3,164 feet where the Hesperia local and Thorn local are expected to set out their cars, and with our train only being around 700 feet long, there'll be no problem fitting them in there.
Oh no, this one's on too. Shit.
That map I showed you is available on the OC in the Depot Plus server, and there's a map for every local that shows where the setouts are to be made, where the pickups are. Really makes it pretty easy for somebody, even if they're new to the territory.
I'm gonna have to drop this part too, so did you get clear of that switch before this one go back?
We turn off our ditch lights and dim our front light as we pull off the main into the siding. Spotting our cars where they're expected, we'll set some handbrakes and uncouple, and we need to take the Fred off the back because another train will couple onto it and you don't want them smashing into a Fred. Generally you do take those off when you're through moving a train.
Alright,
For one thing, the Freds contain a rechargeable battery, so every time they're used, they're removed and recharged for the next train.
Alright, switch is lined. You can pull forward and get back one car. Or push forward, I should say.
Closing our angle cock, opening up the coupler, pulling forward to disconnect from the cars we just set out.
You have about 4 cars.
Taking a quick check of the dispatcher panel, you see the lunar colored light near the middle at the bottom, meaning our switch is open, and you also see to the left that there is an eastbound train needing to get past us. We can't work in front of an oncoming train, so we need to line the switches for normal mainline movement and let that train get by before we make our runaround move and park our locomotives and end this local job.
3 cars to go.
3 cars.
Two cars to go.
2 cars.
Keep coming back.
Coming back.
Just have about a car and a half.
Okay, about a car and a half.
When we turn off the signal fleeting, that means the signal won't continue to re-clear, that is, go back to green every time a train passes. It'll drop to red as soon as this train passes, so then we can go out on the main line. It's called fleeting because it allows a fleet of trains to get by with just one signal clearance. That stack train may not be moving as quickly as you would expect, but there's a 35-mile-an-hour speed limit through the town of Victorville.
BNSF 7222, opening up the switch, main 2 between CP Frost and CP Victorville. I'm going to move east and park my power.
We turn the ditch lights and the bright main headlight on as we begin to enter the main line in order to comply with railroad rules. Pushing the short hood trail button is the equivalent of climbing in the locomotive and changing the DPU headlight setting, which allows us to independently control the headlight on this rear locomotive. That's important because we're about to make a reverse move over a grade crossing, and so we need to have, again by law, our ditch lights and our bright light turned on. There go the lights. In Run 8, whether you're using a rail driver or just a keyboard, you do have separate controls for your rear light versus your front light, just as you would on a prototype locomotive.
About 7 cars now.
Alright.
5 cars. 3 cars. 2 cars. 1 car. Where are you? There. Good. Give it a little back, please.
Release the brakes.
Here comes the next eastbound. He's still a ways behind me, so I don't need to worry too much, but I am on his track, so I do want to get out of his way before he gets here.
All right. Good to go.
horn's a lot louder now because I'm outside the locomotive. It's nice and quiet in that cab.
Alright, the cruiser set out on 105. I'm going to move over to 102 to pick up those DPUs.
Oh, I was gonna go up on 109 there to get them out of my way so I can start humping.
I can, I guess send them over this way and then I'll hook up to them. I can take them off on 109, bring them up to the shop.
Other than I can't AI it, I'm just gonna, they'll be up here at Seabird.
Shutting off the locomotive or the prime mover. And we're going to do the same thing with the 7227. Now we could go inside the cab and do that and be a little more prototypical as we did at the first part of the series when we started it from inside the cab. I'm taking the easy way out here. Now we're going to relinquish the locomotive. Since this is a multiplayer game, we have to relinquish it, and that means that somebody else can now come in and operate these locomotives. If I didn't do that, this locomotive would remain under my control. Kind of a good feature because you wouldn't want to go to the restroom or something and somebody else is taking your train. So once you've taken control of a train, it's yours until you relinquish it. Now we're going to take a look at the switch list from the OC and signal that we have actually set out those pickups that we made back in Hesperia.
Well, guys, I hope you all have a good day. I'm going to mark off for a while and have a wonderful Father's Day or Sunday or whatever day it is for you.
Well, thank you, sir.
Have a good one, Steve.
You too.